Charlotte Lysdale was 68 years old when she vanished from northern Minnesota in the summer of 1985. She was a widow who had spent decades building businesses alongside her husband, a woman who hosted family dinners, planted geraniums every Mother's Day, and had recently made the practical decision to sell her lake home and move to a smaller apartment nearby. But the man who bought that home would later claim that on the night she disappeared, she handed him the deed and walked away with only $10,000 in cash. Charlotte was never seen again. Her body has never been found. And yet her case would become the first in Minnesota history to go to trial for murder without one. This is her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, usually we do not discuss our cases beforehand, but we did have a little conversation about the case that we're covering today.
Yeah. And I think from that conversation, I think I know why you chose this case.
Why is that?
Well, I think it caught your attention because the woman we're about to talk about, Charlotte, she's in her late 60s, and she just sold a home with owner financing.
She did.
And
yes.
that kind of parallels your life with your mom just kind of recently also selling a house with owner financing.
Yes, this was
She's close to Charlotte's age, and she just did kind of a similar real estate deal.
Yes, was a really hard thing for my mom to do. She lived with my dad, for 50 years, same place, and so leaving that was incredibly hard for her. But she did do an owner financing deal. So this does.
I'm wondering if that's like what you were thinking about when you came across her case, like a little bit.
Okay. So first, I don't think that my mom's situation is going to play out like this at all. Her buyers are really solid people, so we're safe.
We're safe
there. But yeah, I think you mentioned the other day, I think it was something along the lines of mention any type of situation and I can think of like a missing persons case that's connected in some way to that idea or concept. So this is a financial one. Like we've done a lot of domestic violence ones. We've done runaway ones. We've done
adventure ones.
Adventure. Do you need a disappearance that's hiking in the mountains? Recently people on Threads were talking about alpine divorces, in which the alpine divorce concept is that essentially a male partner brings a female partner into the wilderness, and either the situation is particularly dangerous or he leaves her there. And I was like, oh, we have episodes about that.
Take it one step further. We've had episodes about that combined with the Sasquatch.
Oh yeah. So we did have a Bigfoot episode.
Bigfoot. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I can think of any, but this one does.
But I feel like I could pitch, any idea to you and you'd be like, well, actually you can disappear doing that.
Right. Yes.
So even something relatively calm and safe like a real estate transaction, and Amy can be right there like, yep, I can tell you a horror story about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so today she is.
Yeah, so this does her, so this case does parallel, a lot of my mom's situation, which is not unusual. An older woman on her own, widowed, trying to do a financial deal. Right. And I think that's because this is not an uncommon occurrence. Someone older trying to do a financial deal, particularly with real estate, right? As they're aging and they're thinking about what aging looks like. And this case touches on that. So, yeah, I think what is interesting to me as well is that cases that involve older women get so much less coverage.
Yes.
And I think that's particularly true. I've been seeing people talking about the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, right? In which people are shocked that someone her age could be.
But if her daughter wasn't high profile, would we even be hearing about this?
Highly unlikely.
Right.
Because then we know that the news focuses on younger women, right?
Well, and half the time she's not even called Nancy Guthrie. She's called Savannah Guthrie's mom.
Yes. Yeah.
In those news stories.
Right. And so I think that there's ageism that takes place with missing persons cases. So we have talked about many cases involve women who are older. So hopefully we can continue to shine light on cases like this. So, I think, this one does mirror a lot of like my personal life experience, just like watching my mom trying to make these decisions as she's getting older. But again, her buyers are not what we're going to see here. So, in this case, Vanessa knows a little bit more about what's ahead, and we've talked around it a little too much now. So we'll just kind of, you ready to dive in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's June 14th, 1985, and 68-year-old Charlotte Lysdale is on her way to her former lake home. June in Minnesota can be cool, even with the summer just around the corner, and already that evening, the weather is getting chillier. The day is overcast, but on sunny days, Lower Hay Lake shimmers. It's part of a chain of lakes renowned for fishing and boating. Charlotte has spent many years on Lower Hay Lake in this rural section of Minnesota. But on this evening, she's driving out to meet Jerome Bye. Bye had recently purchased Charlotte's home on Lower Hay Lake. It was an owner financing transaction, again, where he paid her annual payments, including interest, instead of going through a mortgage lender. It was an arrangement that worked for both of them. Bye was working on renovating the property, and Charlotte was able to move to an apartment in Pine River, not far away. The two had been scheduled to meet on Saturday, the following day, so that Bye could make his next payment, but he'd called to reschedule for Friday. His wife, Deborah, had gone to pick up his son that weekend to visit, so Friday would be easier for him. Charlotte didn't object. The drive through Minnesota's countryside was pleasant, and the last time she stopped and talked to Bye, he'd taken her on a tour of all the renovations he'd done, walking her from room to room through what had once been her home. Now she's headed back down those same roads. This is a quiet moment just before she disappears, just before her family begins knocking on her apartment door, wondering why the newspaper hadn't been brought inside. It's almost peaceful, just another Minnesota evening on the edge of summer.
So Charlotte went by herself. She didn't take anybody with her on this?
No. So Charlotte was like a very independent woman. And that's really like built into her history, which she's fascinating. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about who she was. Okay. Because though Charlotte had been born in Wisconsin, most of her life was actually spent in Minnesota. So Minnesota is like her whole life, right? And she was part of a wave of German immigrant families who had settled throughout the state, and they built really tight-knit communities throughout Minnesota. And it's also in Minnesota that she met her husband, John. So he's like this tall, blonde guy from a Danish immigrant family. He was nearly 10 years older than her, and they married all the way back in 1934 when Charlotte was just 17. So early in their marriage, they lived near Moncanto, and John worked as a partsman for the Zeismer Motor Company, and Charlotte was, I think, like a stay-at-home wife. Neither of them had extensive formal schooling, which I think is like interesting because I think we discredit a lot of people who don't have formal schooling, right? So John had completed 8th grade. Charlotte had just 2 years of high school, but both of them were really sharp and practical and ambitious.
And I think that's kind of like a story of the time too, right? Like you're talking like the 20s and 30s here probably for them in their schooling. And I don't think that schooling necessarily meant success, right? Like it could if the profession you were going for needed schooling. But otherwise, there were so many things that you could do. Like now everyone's under the impression that everyone needs to go to school.
Right.
Like, and if not school, you need to go into a trades program.
Right. That there has to be like that formality there.
Right.
Yeah. And I do think like, historically speaking, it was a little less expected back at their time than compared to now. Right.
Ooh, and that's an age difference too. So she would have been 17 marrying a like 27-year-old. Yeah. And seeing that would have been normal too.
Right. And so now we would have been like,
whoa, they didn't go to school and she's marrying a nearly 30-year-old man and she's still in her teens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the war, so they spent a lot of their time, in this one section, but after the war, they moved to Pipestone, which is another small rural town, this one near Sioux Falls. And there they start building something together. John becomes the manager of the Pipestone Airport and then the president of a fiberglass boat manufacturing company and later owner of the Pipestone Sales Company. These are not small undertakings, but they required risk, negotiation, bookkeeping, long hours, and Charlotte was there through all of this. Then in 1965, everything changes for them. John had undergone brain surgery that fall, and while recovering at home, he became ill. He died before they could reach the hospital.
Oh, wow. So they were together a long time, but she would have been still kind of young when he died.
Yeah, so she's just 48 years old when he dies.
Oof. So she has a lot of life left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this changes everything. She goes from, being a wife and a business partner to a widow in just a matter of hours. She remains in Pipestone actually for a few more years. So she's surrounded by the life that they had built together, which was nearly 2 decades of shared work, shared plans. And eventually she did move on, though not quickly or not carelessly. It's clear she really thought out everything. Around 1980, she relocates to Lower Hay Lake. The setting was beautiful, but it's also very practical. Her younger brother, Chuck, lived nearby. The two were close, and now they would no longer be separated by hours of highway. She does have other siblings, right? But he is her...
Is he the closest one?
Yeah, they're super
emotionally close. Yeah.
And so Charlotte makes a life for herself there on Lower Hay Lake, right?
Near Chuck. And Chuck is short for Charles, right? They have matching names.
It's a popular name.
No, Charles and Charlotte.
Oh, I guess so, yeah.
It's cute.
Oh, it is.
So maybe they were really close in age, too, and that's why their mom did that.
Yeah, actually, I didn't look up Chuck's age in this. I think he's her younger brother.
Okay.
But, yeah.
But the matching names just make me think they're like a pair.
A unit.
Yep.
So she's now starting her life. It's been a little while since she lost her husband, about 15 years. But she starts trying to build her own little life, right? She regularly hosts New Year's Day dinner with her family. She starts getting into planting geraniums on Mother's Day. She could spend the day knitting or doing needlework, or my favorite, reading the tabloids, which she would pick up at the local grocery store.
That's really fun.
I always loved looking at the tabloids in the 1980s when I was waiting in line.
Me too. I remember some of the covers. I can actually picture some of the alien faces and stuff that they used to put on the tabloid covers.
Oh, the real
Yeah, they would do those out there ones. What was that? Was it the National Enquirer?
Yes,
or something?
That was the National Enquirer. But
Yeah.
I was I liked the celebrity gossip.
Oh, the celebrity ones. I don't think I liked those. I think I found them horrifying, standing in the grocery checkout as a little kid, looking at these really scary pictures and thinking that that's actually happening in the real world.
Yeah, no, I was let's buy them all and bring them home and read them.
Yeah,
which we never did. So go Charlotte. So around 1984, though, this house starts to become harder to manage, which is actually what happened to my mom, right? This just living independently, things started to get a lot harder. Charlotte had an old ankle injury that also just made walking more difficult. So the upkeep on a rural property, the yard, the maintenance, the winter snow, all of it's just becoming too much. Now, that didn't mean she needed around-the-clock care, right? But she just needed to downsize to something more manageable for herself.
Like your mom.
Like my mom, who lives next door to me and gets round-the-clock, I don't know, entertainment, I think.
She does, probably.
So she makes another decision. She's going to sell her home and move to the Woodland Apartments in nearby Pine River. It's a senior citizen apartment complex. It's designed for an aging population in mind. And this is going to be much better suited for her as she began thinking of the latter phases of her life, right? All she needs, though, is a buyer for her home. So selling the property was a monumental step for Charlotte, and it didn't take her long for her to find a buyer in Jerome Bye. Bye was a local tavern owner and real estate agent who worked at the Vacations Properties Network. Charlotte seemed to like Bye. He's nearly 40 years old. He's a longtime resident of the area, and he'd already invested in the Birchwood Tavern, which meant that he was connected to the area. He's familiar with real estate transactions. He's got a regular income. He's got investments, so he's not like representing a financial risk at all. The two quickly came to an agreement. Charlotte had originally been hoping to get $78,500 for her home. Bye would make an initial down payment of $10,500, and every year after, he would pay her a lump sum of $10,000, which included both the principal and the interest. And Bye would do this until he had paid off the mortgage, which would take several years.
This seems really interesting to me, that because you mentioned this at the beginning, and I guess I didn't quite catch on to what the yearly payment meant. But doesn't this seem like a very unusual
Payment structure?
payment? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so, very often people take it like regular monthly payments, like you would pay to a mortgage company. Because in owner financing, basically the seller then, sells the home, and then they take the position of the bank.
Right. Monthly payments just seem more manageable for the buyer, but also more reassuring for the seller.
Right, because like you have a check-in every month that things are going smoothly. Yeah. So it is an interesting structure, because that is, we're talking about, 1980s money, like $10,000 lump sum once a year. That's like a pretty huge amount of capital to like, bring in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, owner financing does include risks, right? So again, like essentially they're bypassing a traditional lender. So Charlotte is acting as the bank or the mortgage lender. And as such, you do take on all of the risks that a typical mortgage lender would manage. So this is just like it's a different type of transaction, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are a variety of reasons that Charlotte and Bye might have set this up instead of a traditional mortgage, because no, Charlotte's not getting the full asking price of her home immediately, like she would have if they'd gone to a mortgage company, but Charlotte didn't rely on that money to move to the apartment complex. Like she's not in financial need.
Okay.
Because Charlotte and John's financial investments had really paid off for them. Charlotte had roughly $200,000 in the bank, enough to live on comfortably after her move. So getting the full sale of the home, wasn't essential for her to move forward with her relocation plans.
Okay, so like a moment ago, you were mentioning like that $10,000 would have been a lot in 1980s money. So how much would like the $200,000 be now?
Yeah, so she has about $636,000, roughly speaking.
Gosh, inflation.
Bank. I know.
It doesn't seem like that long.
Yeah.
From then till now. And that's a huge increase.
Yeah. So like, longtime listeners know this, but one of my like quick links that I keep on my browser all the time is like a inflation calculator, because literally every time money is mentioned, I'm always curious, like how much is that today?
Yeah. Right? Are we talking about, because 10,000 right now doesn't seem like a lot.
Right. Yeah.
But that would have been
like a pretty substantial
right
amount. Do you want me
would
to
have been like 30,000 or something by that?
Well, now I'm curious.
Now you're curious. Okay, we're gonna check that. So what would it be?
So 10,000 today is 32,000.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. About 30,000 based on like your 200,000 to 36. Wow. Okay. So yeah, having somebody come up with that much yearly just seems like those little payments would have been
like easier to manage.
And like I said, also more reassuring on Charlotte's part.
Right. Now, everything with this transaction goes smoothly. Charlotte's able to leave her home of 6 years in good hands. So everything's good. Now, in June, Charlotte was scheduled to get her next payment from Bye. Like she'd seen him in the interim. She'd taken a tour of her former home, but this next meeting was a financial one, and Bye was going to make his, another payment to Charlotte. The two were supposed to meet on June 15th, but Bye called Charlotte to reschedule. One of his ex-wives appears to be what's primary custody of their son, and she lived in Wisconsin, and the two had been talking about their son going to Minnesota for an extended weekend. Bye's current wife, Deborah, and her son were going to drive to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and pick him up and drive him back.
So he was alone waiting for his other son. His wife and his son had gone.
Yes.
And then they're going to La Crosse. That sounds familiar to me, too.
Right. We actually have recently spoken about La Crosse, which is
That must be, because I haven't been there, but it sounds so familiar.
Yeah, we did an episode recently on the disappearance of Evelyn Hartley. And if you remember, this is when we were trying to separate truth from fiction when it came to her disappearance and the mythologization of Ed Gein. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's
okay. So that was
La Crosse.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why it's ringing some bells.
Okay. So she was going there by herself, and he didn't have anybody home. When normally he would have, sounds like he would have had like quite a few people around.
Yeah, so he would have at least had his wife, her son, like would have been in the home with him. When Bye and Charlotte start talking about their next meeting, he asks to change the date to Friday, which makes sense if his family's coming home on Saturday, right? Now, this isn't a big deal to Charlotte, and she goes to meet him that evening, getting there somewhere between 6:10 and 6:20. And Bye says that they visited for about 2 hours before she left, and that's the last known sighting of Charlotte Lysdale. That June, when Charlotte went missing, Charlotte and her extended family both had been traveling. So Charlotte had visited some old friends in Pipestone around the 12th before going to her sister's house in Mankato. And from there, she kind of wound her way back up to Pine River. Meanwhile, her brother Chuck and his wife Barbara went on a short trip to Canada from the 12th to the 16th. So everyone's kind of moving around at this time. Now, Leanne, Charlotte's niece and Chuck's daughter, stopped by Charlotte's apartment on Sunday, June 16th. When Leanne got there, the Sunday paper fell from the front door, and Charlotte, who was an avid reader of the paper, leaving it there uncollected out of her apartment was an oddity that gave Leanne pause. And when Charlotte didn't answer her door, her concern grew. She tested the door handle, and she did find that the apartment was locked. Next, she went and peeked in the garage. Inside was Charlotte's car, indicating that her aunt was home. That's when Leanne grew desperate, likely picturing all sorts of scenarios where her aunt was incapacitated inside her apartment and couldn't reach the door. Coincidentally, this is also my feeling when my mom doesn't answer my phone calls. Or
what is happening?
To the door, right? Now, with Charlotte's travels and Chuck and Barbara's trip, no one had checked on Charlotte in a few days, and that meant that anything could have happened to Charlotte. So during this time, this situation could have become dire, right? So working quickly, Leanne found someone to unlock the door to the apartment, and she stepped inside. Leanne expected to find her aunt there, but instead the apartment was quiet. No Charlotte taking a shower, oblivious to the knocking on her door. No Charlotte collapsed on her bedroom floor. No Charlotte slumped over on the couch. Every possibility that had likely run through Leanne's mind as she waited to get inside her aunt's apartment disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Because if Charlotte wasn't there, where was she?
Right, and her car's in the garage.
Yes.
I guess by the way the story was going, I wasn't expecting that part.
Oh, because she had last driven
she had
out.
left, and how far is it between like her apartment and...
It's a few miles between her new apartment and her old home.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and like, but also like... Charlotte's not particularly ambulatory because she has an ankle injury, right?
Right, but just like being parked in the garage, garage doors closed, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Neat and tidy.
Yes.
Huh.
Now, they do a survey of her apartment. It yields no clues. Like in the kitchen, there were fresh coffee grounds as though Charlotte had been in the middle of preparing a cup, but Charlotte and her purse were gone. As Leanne recently told the Brainerd Dispatch, it just escalated from there. It was not a fun time. In short order, a full-scale search for Charlotte was launched. Soon it ballooned into a multi-agency investigation involving Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, as well as agents from Brainerd, Thief River Falls, and Grand Rapids. The Cass County Sheriff, Louis Chalik, flew over Pine River several times in a small aircraft looking for signs of Charlotte. Others searched the Pine River itself. The waterway ran behind Charlotte's apartment complex. Canoers took the waterways, paddling from Pine River to Whitefish Lake looking for her, and aerial infrared photos were used to see if there was any changes to the vegetation in the surrounding areas. Since there had been no signs of a disturbance or altercation at her apartment, everyone thought that Charlotte had met with some sort of accident or had wandered away and needed assistance. But there was a nagging doubt. Again, with Charlotte's old injury, she walked with a pronounced limp, so traveling any sort of distance on foot would have been difficult for her. So attention quickly shifted to piecing together what her last moments were and what might have happened to her. 10 days after she went missing, Cass County Chief Deputy Jim Dowson said, "We've been following up on leads, but at this time we have no clues at all. We have nothing that points to foul play, but we are not ruling that out." But as the days passed and there were no signs of Charlotte, the idea of foul play seemed to be much more likely. By August 21st, a full 2 months after she was last seen, the Cass County Sheriff told reporters, "There's no question in mind that she was killed. We've had a suspect for a long time. I'm not naming anyone. It's still an open file and we're still working on it. I hope it's solved, but there are no guarantees."
We'll be back in a moment.
Seasons passed while her family waited for news. Chuck offered a reward of $10,000 for information about his sister and asked hunters to search the woods for his sister's body, but to no avail. And behind the scenes, investigators were quietly working on Charlotte's case, piecing together her movements, her contacts, and circling closer to their suspect. It would take 2 years before a case was made it to the grand jury, but when it did, few seemed surprised by the direction it took. On September 2nd, 1987, a grand jury was convened to review evidence and call witnesses. The grand jury proceedings were kept quiet while they reviewed information, but Crow Wing County Attorney Stephen Rathke told reporters, "We have as much evidence now as we ever will." I'm not sure that's a reassuring statement, but that's what they were going with.
Yeah.
By the end of the grand jury, they announced that there would be charges for first-degree murder and theft, which was pertaining to the deed of Charlotte's former home on Lower Hay Lake. Though the suspect wasn't originally named, all the locals knew who was being looked at during the grand jury convening. Jerome Bye. He was the purchaser of Charlotte's home and the last known person to see her alive. The case had some unusual aspects. One of which is that Charlotte lived in Crow Wing County, but she was last seen in Cass County, and as such, officials couldn't say for certain where these crimes might have taken place. So Cass County Attorney Earl Mao was brought in as well for the prosecution. So both attorneys were ready if the grand jury decided to move forward with these charges, which they did. So soon Jerome Bye would be charged with 7 more counts, including second-degree murder, first-degree assault, receiving of stolen property, theft by swindling, false pretense, and aggravated robbery.
So he stole the deed?
So we're going to get into that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
because at first I was like, maybe it wasn't him. Like, what if something happened to her on the way home or when she got home?
yeah.
But now
Because
there's
she was
a stolen
found-
deed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause
Right.
she was at home and the car was there and...
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, speaking to the press, Crow County Attorney Stephen Rathke said, "All we know is that she is gone and he has the deed."
Okay. Huh.
Because, yeah, this is the part that we haven't talked about yet. And it's what happened on that meeting on June 14th when Charlotte went to go collect payment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with his wife and stepson away, again, only Charlotte and Jerome knew what happened that night and Charlotte's missing. So it's just Jerome there to share the details. Jerome Bye says that Charlotte had offered him the deed on the property in full after his payment of $10,000 that he was going to make to her that day.
Wasn't that only the first payment?
Yeah, so that's the first payment after the down payment.
Yeah, okay.
So he said that she liked him so much that she offered to close out their deal early with him having paid only a total of $20,500, which does include some interest on the property. So,
And she wanted $78,000?
yeah.
So why would she...
Well, he says it's because she liked him a lot.
Nobody likes anybody that much.
No.
Unless they're family.
Yeah. So, again, this is substantially less than what they had agreed on. But again, like he's the only one who was there.
So yeah, we're just taking his word for it.
Now, 3 days after Charlotte went missing, Jerome registered the deed in his name, completing the property transfer in full.
Okay.
So
that would have been like Monday.
yeah, so it's like, I think he does go in like that first Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Charlotte's property is now his for just $20,500.
Yikes.
But in addition to Charlotte being missing, so too was this final $10,000 payment he had said that he paid to her that evening. So that's not in her house.
So he really only paid the $10,500.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Huh.
But the $10,000 he says that he paid for her is not in her apartment at all. Now, this had led to, obviously, questions from the start.
Yeah.
Like, though Jerome had assured everyone she had decided to sell it to him for just $20,500 because she liked him, those close to her felt like this really wasn't like her. This is not part of who she was to kind of forgo this full payment. Again, she had regularly managed business transactions on her own, so this does not fit in with, like, her history. Because, like, I think that's, like, one of the things, like, you could just say, like, oh, she's a nice older woman who...
Yeah, but nobody's, like I said, unless it's your kid or grandkid, nobody's that nice.
Right. Now, this incongruity in the pricing and Charlotte's behavior was enough to cast suspicion, and it was enough for the grand jury to decide to bring all 9 of those charges against Bye. It's like a whole package of charges, right? There's only one problem, though, and that's Charlotte Lysdale is still missing, and Minnesota had never tried a murder case in an instance with a missing body. In fact, it had only been possible to do so in the state since 1981. And that's when lawmakers decided that circumstantial evidence could be enough, since it was prohibited someone from destroying a body in the hopes of getting away with murder. So they were like, oh, wait, what if someone actually does this on purpose, right? But they had yet to test this out in a trial. So Charlotte Lysdale's case would be the first attempt at this.
I feel like we've talked about quite a few cases where this was the first attempt.
Yes.
In different states.
Yeah. So we actually talked about like what is like known as the first one in the United States. We've also talked about cases where there's strong suspicions of who the suspect is and a lot of evidence, but it's not moving to trial because they don't want to risk it. So yeah, so we've seen this play out in a multitude of ways in this particular type of conversation. So they're trying for the first time in Minnesota with Charlotte's case. So again, trying this case is going to be a risky move for prosecutors. But like Rathke said, they were at a point when it just didn't seem possible that they would ever discover Charlotte's body. So they're like, we got to go with what we've got, right? Now, the trial was delayed a few times as Crow Wing County Judge John Spellacy found a suitable location to hold it. Now, the Brainerd Dispatch did regular reporting on Charlotte's disappearance and Bye's arrest. And he felt that both the Crow Wing and Cass Counties populations, like, this just like wouldn't be suitable for venues for a trial. He said, I am convinced that most of the potential jurors in Cass and Crow Wing counties have heard or seen a great deal about this case. Enough so that their natural curiosity for the unusual has been firmly whetted.
Seems like such an old-timey way of putting it, and we're in the 80s here.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, he ordered the trial to be moved to Itasca County. I'm sorry, Minnesotans. I did not look that up beforehand. Which was far away enough for him that he felt like there would be just like less coverage of the case there. On February 11th, 1988, jury selection begins. Bye would be facing, again, a whole host of charges, including murder, but by this point, they actually decided to drop the assault charges before the trial began. Now, both the prosecution and the defense quickly made their opening arguments. The defense argued that the case against their client was based on speculation and conjecture, that only circumstantial evidence of Bye's involvement in Charlotte's disappearance and death was being used in the case. The prosecution, though, alleged that Bye did commit these crimes. Furthermore, he had motive, they said. Bye had been in the process of purchasing a different building, a complex of 5 shops known as Country Corner. He had begun that process on May 17th, 1985, which was just weeks before Charlotte went missing. The property was costly. It was $215,000, but it would also generate income for him. There was one problem, though. The first payment of $64,000 was due on August 1st. Bye had held the property using 9 shares of stock in the company 3M, but he would have to come up with the cash for this first payment, which was quite substantial.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. Now, these real estate transactions were the basis of the prosecution's argument. They wanted to prove motive, and much of the trial centered around this argument. Bye, they said, would need to sell Charlotte's property in order to make this first payment on the commercial property he was trying to buy. As part of this, one of the witnesses they called was the seller of the Country Corners property. Her name is Catherine. Just a lot of C names.
There is.
Now, Catherine testified that since their sale agreement that she'd seen Bye outside the property several times just staring at it. And she said he didn't speak to her any of the times that he was there.
Okay. So Catherine had seen that?
Yeah, so basically they're trying to set up this idea that he's like obsessed
with this building?
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that I drove by my current house when...
And just stared at it. But I mean, who hasn't when they're
at it.
looking at something or buying something? If you fall in love with something, you might do that.
Yeah.
But in hindsight here, I could see it being
like
a different situation than most.
Now, they also called Rodney, who was Bye's manager at the real estate company that Bye had worked under. Rodney said that Bye did need the equity from Charlotte's house in order to make the first payment on Catherine's business property. He said he advised Bye that it would be hard to find someone to take over the payment plan on Charlotte's home because of the high yearly lump sum payments. Mm-hmm. He also said that Bye had told him that he planned on paying off Charlotte's home, though Rodney wasn't certain where Bye was going to get the money from. He also said that he advised Bye against meeting Charlotte alone at the Lower Hay Lake house and paying less than the full amount because it would appear that Bye was taking advantage of someone.
That's exactly what I thought before, because imagine having to be, say you were innocent, say he was innocent. Mm-hmm. You'd hate to be that last person who saw her and then be like, oh yeah, I planned to meet her at this time because my family wasn't here.
Right.
Like, that doesn't look good.
No. Right.
So as a man, maybe if you're meeting with a woman by yourself, maybe you shouldn't be by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think like in this case, you know, even if you take Charlotte's disappearance out of it, right? Like what Rodney is trying to say is like, hey, like if you are meeting alone with an elderly woman buyer and suddenly you're paying dramatically less for the property, like everyone's going to be suspicious of what happened. Like it can be completely above board, but without other people there to witness that transaction and that exchange, like there's just going to always be kind of just questions about how that came about.
Right. So it would be like Rodney's saying, it's in his own best interest to have somebody else there to say, look, he wasn't
pressuring her or Now, Bye didn't listen to Rodney.
Yeah.
You know, and Rodney said that he didn't see Bye that entire weekend. And when he saw him again on Monday after, Bye was in possession of the warranty deed for the Lower Hay Lake property. And by July 2nd, Rodney's like so creeped out about like, I think what happened, I'm assuming, that he sent a letter to Bye terminating his position at the agency.
Okay. So Rodney definitely had red flags going. Like,
yeah, because like, you know, again, even taking out her disappearance from this scenario, I would assume that you would want everyone in your agency not to have any kind of suspicion about real estate transactions. Like, that's what you do, right?
Right.
You know, in particular light of she's now missing, all of these factors likely led to the reason why Rodney decides to, you know, terminate his position at the agency. Now, both the prosecution and defense knew that the case hinged not just on motive, but on whether or not Charlotte would have actually sold her property for substantially less. Again, only Bye and Charlotte were there the night that Charlotte was last seen, so both sides kind of need to fill in the blanks about what went down. The first person who had been called to the stand was actually Chuck, who's, again, Charlotte's brother. In the past, Charlotte had actually lent Chuck money. First, $8,000 so he could purchase his home, and then later $15,000 to help him start a clothing business that ended up failing. Chuck said that he had tried to pay back the money, but Charlotte had refused.
So I wonder if they're going to use this as like, well, she usually gives away money.
Right. I think they were angling in that direction, right?
Okay.
Now, to counter this, because I think that's the implication.
Right. Because they would use Chuck saying that, where he's probably just trying to say what a nice person his sister was. And they're going to be like, oh.
Also, I think that low-key there was some trying to like cast some suspicion on Chuck himself. Like Chuck took advantage of her.
Okay.
You know, but like literally this is his like closest sibling and she was supportive of him.
Yeah. I mean, it was his daughter doing the check on her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Now, to counter kind of this kind of conversation, witnesses from Charlotte's bank were also called. There was a loan officer at the bank who said that on June 14th, so the day before Thursday, Charlotte had come into the bank and had asked the loan officer to compute the total remaining balance owed to her on a piece of property. This included an exact calculation on the total interest due to her if the property was paid in full.
Okay. So she was intending to get payment, right?
Yeah. So, you know, what happens with interest is like the interest amount like due is going to change depending on your total payment. So this is like she came in to find out what's the total closeout price.
Right. So she's not, it doesn't seem like she's not looking into how to get the rest of her.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, Charlotte did not disclose which property she was talking about to the loan officer, but the loan officer, Cheryl, said that Charlotte wanted every penny that was due to her. During the trial, Cheryl couldn't be specific about what the total was because she didn't keep the figure. After all, this financing wasn't going through the bank itself and the bank wasn't involved in the sale, so it didn't make sense for them to keep this kind of paperwork of this calculation. Now, the implication here was that this was for the Lower Hay Lake property, but would this implication be, you know, enough? Soon, Bye was himself called to the stand to give his version of the events. He said that she called him at the end of May and asked for him to come to her apartment. There, she offered to give him the warranty deed for just $10,000 more in cash. And later, he claimed that she followed up by calling him at work to ask about it, and he said that he would follow up with his wife.
Why would he have to follow that up with his wife?
Like, why wouldn't you just say yes?
Yeah, like, why would you have to be like, oh, asking the wife,
let me see.
Is it okay if we spend a lot less on our home?
Yeah. Like, that would be weird.
It would be weird.
Now, he then said that they had set the meeting date for the 15th, but then she asked him to discuss the offer, or not to discuss the offer with anyone else. Then he said on the 14th, with his wife and stepson Gunn, he called her to reschedule. And he said she arrived around 6:15 or 6:20 p.m. and that she stayed for about 2 hours. She gave him the warranty deed and the property abstract, and he gave her the $10,000. And that's the last time he saw her.
It just keeps getting weirder and weirder the more this guy talks.
By the time it came to the closing arguments, Stephen Rathke was ready to wrap up. He told the jury that the only logical conclusion was that Bye killed Charlotte and that all paths led to him. He painted Bye as kind of a man who was obsessed with buying the Country Corners building, so obsessed that he would be willing to kill. Of evidence, Rathke said that in the days after signing the purchase agreement for the Country Corners property, Bye had actually listed Charlotte's house for sale for $119,500. Now, the defense argued that none of the prosecution's arguments showed without a shadow of doubt that Bye killed Charlotte. That she was missing, yes, but that Jerome Bye had killed her, no. There simply wasn't enough evidence, they argued, to prove it. It would be left up to the jury to decide. On a Friday afternoon, after days of testimony and witnesses, the jury began their deliberation, ending that afternoon without having reached a verdict. They convened again on Saturday. Again, their task is not an easy one. They're working through corpus delicti, a case without a body, and this is extremely difficult. Add to the fact that Minnesota jurors had not had to consider a case like this before, there's like this immense amount of pressure on this jury. Finally, at 1 p.m., after 11 hours of total deliberation, the jury came forward with their verdict. Bye was innocent of the first and second degree murder charges of Charlotte Lysdale. He was also innocent of aggravated robbery and theft by swindle. Of theft from a person and receiving stolen property, though, he was found guilty. So this has to do with him having this deed.
Okay.
Directly after the verdict, he was remanded to the custody of the county sheriff's department, and the judge was worried about his safety given the interest in this case. Bye was sentenced to 3 years in prison, which was an upward departure for the sentence, meaning he was given more time than typical for the crimes he was convicted of.
And it's just because really the only concrete evidence was having the deed, right?
Yeah.
'Cause they didn't find any blood. They didn't find any of her belongings at his house, right?
Yeah.
They didn't find anything of him at her apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a tough one, isn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, is this a situation where, a person did do those things and was good at hiding evidence? Or is this a case of you're not looking at other possibilities, right?
Like supremely bad timing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like because they just couldn't prove, they didn't have enough evidence of anything.
And while that's frustrating, it makes sense, though, in this one.
Yeah, because like
What
a
is
lot
there?
of things add up, but a lot of things don't.
Right. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are hard. Because sometimes we're like, but there was this or there was this.
Mm-hmm.
How could he not get anything? But there really isn't in this case.
Yeah. I mean, this was a hard case to prove. But again, going back to what the prosecution said, like, we have as much evidence as possible. Like, they weren't ever going to get more unless they found, Charlotte's body.
Yeah. So did he serve his full 3 years?
Well, yeah. I mean, he immediately appealed this verdict with the Minnesota Court of Appeals, which allowed him to stay out of prison until they reached a verdict on his case, but that doesn't go in his favor either. So the associate judge on that, Gary Crippen, wrote, "In this case, the entire defense was premised on the claim of the victim's unexplainable folly in accepting $10,000 cash as payment to satisfy a much larger contract obligation. The defense rests wholly on the implication of the victim's undependable business judgment." So that's specifically dealing with the deed. Like,
Yeah.
would she have actually taken substantially less? Of the upward departure in the initial sentencing, the Court of Appeals defended this, stating that the case involved theft from an elderly widow and involved a major economic loss. With that loss, Bye's lawyers tried to bring this case to the state Supreme Court, but they were denied. Bye would have to serve time for receiving stolen property and theft from a person, but by then, Charlotte had been missing for 4 years. In the years since Charlotte disappeared, little movement has happened in her case. On November 5th, 1992, an anonymous tip was reported. The tipster said that Charlotte's body could be found buried in a yard on Norway Lake Road. At the time of the tip, the property was a daycare facility, and investigators convened on the property to dig up a portion of the yard next to the property's garage. Using a backhoe, they searched for 5 hours, but they were unsuccessful in finding Charlotte. Since then, media attention really has faded from her case. Recently, though, reporter Teresa Bork sat down with Leanne, Charlotte's niece, for an interview with Brainerd Dispatch. The Dispatch, again, had followed Charlotte's story throughout her disappearance and trial. In the interview, Leanne recounts her experience of going to her aunt's apartment. She was the first person to realize that Charlotte was missing. Now, so many years later, most of Charlotte's immediate family has passed away, including Leanne's father, Chuck. Leanne believes that Charlotte's body might be in Lower Hay Lake, and just might be at depths where surface searching was unable to find her. "I'm sure somebody does know what happened to her," Leanne told Teresa Bork. And until someone comes forward, Charlotte's last remaining relatives remain hopeful that some closure during their lifetime will be possible. A Minnesota Nocturne. Charlotte Lysdale, 68, missing since June 14th, 1985, from Pine River, Minnesota. Out in the Minnesota lakes cool, winds blow off the water, fingers of air tangling in our hair, the kind of night that feels like coming home. Stay a while, watch a universe spin above you, your back in the damp grass tracing each constellation with your finger. In the future, you could follow the flight path of the plane that searches for you, hoping to catch a glimpse of your body floating in the lakes. Down a solitary stretch of river, this is how, for decades, you passed over the same late spring day without knowing that down the long stretch of the future, you would hold your breath and step over the threshold of your home for one last time. How many anniversaries am I living now? The day I, too, will hold the whole sky in my palm, turn a reckless cheek to the wind, and step into something unknown.
For more information about our show, please visit shegoesbyjanepodcast.com.
Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.